Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of ATSU's Lunch and Learn series. My name's Joe Vincent, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this episode. Hang on, I just unplugged my headphones. Have you ever unplugged your headphones when you don't intend to? So now I can't hear myself or anyone else. There it is, and I'm back. Today's episode is going to deal with research support, and it's not going to include a lot of me, and you can see why, right? I think we all understand. But I am going to do the introductions. So if you're watching us today, there's a couple of ways that you can interact with us as we talk about today's topics. One of those is at live.atsu.edu. That's our live stream feed. You can watch this presentation live. You can also ask questions. A lot of times that requires a live stream account that people don't have. So a more convenient way is on the Facebook. And you can see the address right there in the lower third, just its.atsu.edu/FB. And you can use that to ask questions. We'll monitor both of those feeds and try to work your questions into the program so that we get them answered live here with our experts. And then finally, when it's all said and done, Corey's going to airbrush the heck out of it. And maybe do some bad lip reading. I don't know what he does, right? Yep. And then we'll put the finished product up on YouTube. Once again, the address is there in the lower third. You can always refer back to this episode of the Lunch and Learn by going to YouTube. If you want to find prior episodes, those are all available there as well. Now, today we have a scintillating topic to discuss. And as you can see, we got a room full of people because it takes a lot of folks to explain what may be one of the more obscure and yet important functions at ATSU, and that's research support. Joining us right here is Jack Morris. He's the director of ATSU Research Support. Sitting out there next to Kirsty is Alison Vailer-Snyder. She's, among many other things, professor in athletic training in the Department of Interdisciplinary Health Sciences. She's also the assistant director of the Research Support Department, and in her spare time, she's a research professor at the School of Osteopathic Medicine in Arizona, and probably like a half a dozen other hobbies that you tag on to that as well with all of your free time, I would imagine. Sitting right here next to Jack is Deb Goggin. She is the lone science writer for research support, so that's why she looks tired. Do you feel tired? I feel tired just talking about your responsibilities, so it's sympathetic. And then finally, joining us on Zoom is Vanessa Pazdernik, and she is a senior biostatistician. Which is also one of those that makes me a little bit uncomfortable just saying because I have no idea what that means. So we're excited to hear about all of you guys in the Research Support Department and how your activity supports the mission of ATSU. And I'm going to hand the talking duties right over to my faithful and ever-present co-host, Kirsty Gaither, over at the ATSU Mesa campus. And Kirsty, you want to help get us started today?
Yeah, let's do this. All right, so as Joe said, we have an amazing group of the core support team of the Research Support Department at ATSU. But first, let's talk about the Research Department, and because I have Alison right here, I'm going to ask her, what does it do, who does it support?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our research support is a part of the Division of Research Grants and Information Systems. So much like we have sponsored programs and ITS, as well as the Still Research Institute, research support is a standalone department within that group. And our organization, our group is really a service to faculty on campus, and we align well with the strategic plan, which is to increase faculty's dissemination and productivity of research. And so we help people do that. And so we have a lot of different types of personnel within our group, a lot of different types of ways that we can help faculty in terms of completing their research.
Right, and is it for faculty who are already involved in research, or what level do you have to be before you come to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have resources on our side that can help from the novice, somebody who's just getting started with research, all the way up to somebody who's been doing research for quite some time and maybe has been successful with different funding opportunities. So we can kind of serve everyone in that way. And I should note, too, that we're here to help all the schools and all of the programs. So we're not targeted to one entity. We really are here to help everyone.
And then how advanced does this research have to be? I mean, is it sort of starting out clinical trials? I mean, is there a point where you stop and hand it over to someone else?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So our focus primarily is on clinical research. So that's really where our emphasis is. And the studies don't have to be complex. They can be simple, but we have resources and talents and people on our staff with expertise to help with even more complex sponsored studies and things like that.
Well, that seems to be a great way to sort of hand off to Vanessa, and Vanessa is joining us via Zoom today. And Vanessa, you do biostatistics, so if you could tell us a little bit more about what that is.
Yeah, sure. So probably the most basic description of what we do is provide data analysis to return some interpretation to the researcher that they can use for a poster or manuscript. However, I will say that we'd like to highlight that we are involved in other aspects of the research lifecycle. In particular, we would like to recommend that researchers reach out to us early to assist from the beginning, because we can help with helping them draft up a quality research question that has a testable hypothesis, helping them choose between different potential study designs. For example, they may be trying to choose between a randomized control design or a crossover study. So we can kind of help with giving advice on which is the best to choose for their particular study. We can also help in this early stage sample size, taking into account possible dropout or missing data that we could experience, and other issues like blinding or bias or confounding variables that we have to be aware of. And make sure that we're collecting those data or selecting our sample in a special way that we avoid such issues. And during this time, we also appreciate the research question, I think, a little bit more. We have that extra time to discuss all of these intricacies with the researcher. So that's kind of the very beginning of our involvement with this whole research process with the researcher. Then there's the data collection. This is an area, a time where we're a little bit less active, but we can help with quality controls as data is coming in. We can make sure that we're seeing the data that we expect to see. There's not any hiccups or weird things going on. And if a researcher is using something like REDCap, we can help them with making sure that that's all set up properly. And then after data collection, that's kind of the bulk of our work where we're doing the analyses. Usually we're doing the planned analyses that we had written ahead of time during that planning stage. Sometimes we have unusual results and we have to do some extra post hoc tests, so we do those as necessary. And then finally, after that, we work with the science writer and the researcher authors to help with dissemination, writing this up in the manuscript, having appropriate graphical displays for publication, in the right resolution, those types of things. So that's kind of the big, really large overview of what we do. We can also offer technical assistance if there's a researcher who likes to be more independent, if they just want some advice on what statistical methods they need to use, or if they need to have some advice on the particular software that they're using to analyze the data, such as SAS or R or RStudio. Those are the software that we primarily use. And so that sums up our role here as a statistician support in research support.
And it sounds like it's super customized to sort of the individual faculty needs, but do you have sort of like a turnaround time or sort of like a standard length of time that you have that you're working with professors for?
Yeah, so you're right. It does really depend on the individual's needs, how complex their research question is. If it's just as simple, they've already collected the data and they just want to analyze a few trends, do some regression analyses, I would recommend at least a week for a turnaround time if it's something simple like that. Obviously, if it's more complex, then we can be looking at a little bit longer time period.
Awesome. And then let's also talk to Deb, because she also looks a little bit more specifically at sort of core services in the research support department. So Deb, what can you tell us about sort of who is a scientific writer? What do you do? Why do you need a scientific writer?
I'm pretty much in the tail end of the research process. So when the researcher is wanting to submit their article to a peer-reviewed journal, I'm the one who is getting that in the format that it needs to be in. And so I'm very familiar with most of the journal requirements for a large selection of journals. Most of the journals that you would see our kind of faculty researchers would want. So I'm pretty familiar with all of those. I've worked extensively with faculty from every single school. I do a little bit more than just clinical studies. Sometimes I actually am helping the basic scientists with, biochemists, microbiologists, getting their articles into journal format, making sure that the references are in the correct format, and to make sure that the language is as clear as possible, because it's very hard to get published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal. And the more that you are able to get your document as polished as possible, the more likely it's going to be able to get through the peer review process and get published. And we want our researchers to get published in good peer reviewed journals. And so that's what I mostly do.
So when the whole time Vanessa was talking, I was thinking, I have no relatable connection in my own life to be able to appreciate the biostatistician's role. And it's not because it doesn't sound super important, Vanessa. That sounded really important. However, I have written a few things for publication. And so I want to ask, the first question I have is, this is a service that's available to any faculty member at ATSU?
Yes.
Is it faculty only?
No. I do sometimes work with staff members. Sometimes I work with residents. If a student, I don't generally work with students, but if they're doing a project with a faculty member and the faculty member is encouraging them to pursue publication, I will sometimes work with students who are doing an outside research project, like a case study. Sometimes interns will do case studies when they're out on their clinical rotations, and a faculty member here will connect me with that student to do, because it's a separate thing. We just want to encourage peer-reviewed journal publications for ATSU in general as much as possible, and I just try to facilitate, but I mostly work with faculty. Yeah,
that's a remarkable service. As I said, I have a limited amount of experience with this, but I know that the guidelines for publication are so stringent. It's probably really nice to have someone at your disposal who knows all of those requirements step by step. And will you literally take the document and say, okay, here's all the things I think you need to change to make it publishing ready?
Yes.
You have the coolest job now. If I had an award, I would hand it to you. And so, Vanessa, if I understood what you were saying correctly, I think it's someone here at ATSU who I receive emails from every now and then has some quote that says, if you get to the end of your project and you're calling the statistician, you're sunk, or something like that, or you really messed up. Because typically, a noob like me would imagine that I'm going to design my project, I'm going to collect all the data, and then I'm going to bring everything to you at the end and say, help me make this something, put this in Excel, please, and do some formulas. And what you were saying was, you really need to be involved right back at the concept phase to help.
Exactly.
Right? If I'm putting it in Joe the plumber words, then I'm saying the statistician needs to be involved at the very beginning.
Right, yeah, we can help. If you did all the data collection without consulting the statistician before you met with us, it could be something simple. Well, if you would collected, planned on 20 more subjects, this would have been something that would have been valid and viable for publication. Or if you had simply thought about collecting maybe age as a variable, you would have avoided some bias in your results that we can no longer go back and check. So there's a lot of things that maybe a researcher wouldn't think about if they hadn't met with a statistician, that the statistician can point to.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm getting there. I'm telling you, I came into this episode going, boy, I know so little that I'm not even sure I could carry on a coherent conversation. But I'm getting a little better, Jack. Do you feel like I'm getting a little better?
If you ever get a prescription and you open up all that documentation and you look at all the clinical trials, et cetera, all right, all that has to be there before it hits the market.
Right.
That's one of the jobs of the biostatistician, They have to understand that, and they have their own methods and best practices that are understood and recognized in the industry.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Let's see. Let's do one more question. Kirsty, I don't know if you have a burning one on your brain before we go to a quick break. Is there anything left here? Because when we come back, I want to talk a little bit higher level, like maybe raise the elevation a little bit and talk about how this fits into the big university picture. But before we go to a break, it's you get first dibs if you want. Do you have any good?
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, especially because you have the director of research support sitting right next to you. So I'd love to ask him just a brief question about project management and coordination and sort of what he does and sort of oversees and sort of the larger role of research support being.
So the best practices of project management, the industry standard is from the Project Management Institute out of the West Coast, or excuse me, East Coast. And really, project management sounds boring and geeky, and it is. However, what it does, it reduces the risk of failure by following best practices. Okay? And some of those geeky best practices is just having it very organized. What is the scope of the project? What are the key milestones of the project? How do you back into that to make sure that everyone knows who's on first, second, and third and who's doing what by when? Is it ahead of schedule? Is it behind schedule? And what's the status? And if there's changes to the scope, how is that managed? How do you keep everyone on the same page of where the project is at, and if there are issues or there are problems, is there a process to raise that to the PI or to the faculty member? And that's what we strive to do in the project management arena, is get it organized and help deliver results for the PI and for ATSU. It's all about results.
Okay, I thought of another one. We can break after this, but I'm listening to you talk. I'm thinking, so where does it start? Are there certain folks that are like, okay, you're a research person, or we say to you, Joe, faculty member, we would like for you to have a research role, and so you talk to Jack and get his team and help them help you out? Or is it literally like a free-for-all? Can anyone on faculty come to you and say, I have a project I'd like to try, and blah, blah, blah? Or how does that work? Are there...
Well, it's not quite a free-for-all, but at times it can be. Really, we support the faculty and clinicians. That's who our primary customer base is, all right?
Okay.
And then in that area, we have to focus on the ones that have external funding, and then internal funding, and the ones that don't have funding. You know?
Okay.
Because funding is so important to the university.
So this sort of works in conjunction with sponsor programs and grants.
Absolutely.
So are you the guys that pick them up after they get some funding?
Well, here's a scenario. If you have a faculty member that has an idea, they may go to sponsor programs and write the grant. Mm-hmm. They may get a little help, or they may get no help. Mm-hmm. Let's say they get the funding, and they may have a good plan and a protocol outlined and hit the ground running. Some of them may say, wow, we've got this money, now what do we do?
Yeah,
Help.
yeah.
And so it's a variety of things and variety of people that come to us at different phases.
Cool. So if I'm a faculty member and I have a project I'd like to do, I may start with the sponsored programs folks to get funding. I may bring some with me or not need any. And I can say, hey, Jack, I'm going to need help with this.
Correct.
What can you guys do to help? And that part is kind of open-ended. Like
And at that point in time, when they're starting to write the grant, many times they engage the biostatisticians to make sure they get it set up right for their application.
Oh, cool.
And also, it helps with the grant funding if they have a very cool resume, CV, that the biostatisticians can throw in there.
So Vanessa, it really is all on your shoulders. I don't know if you're comfortable with that or you're even aware, but we all just discovered this. Okay, I'm getting cues from off camera. I am a terrible lip reader. But it appears that Alison has something to say. And that's literally the message that I was just given.
Well, I love to talk about research, so I couldn't help myself. But the other thing to think about, too, is that in terms of, Jack talked about the project management, but in terms of our research, we can also, we have experience with the regulatory bodies that you might have to work with within doing a research project. So the IRB, which would be potentially local, or there could be multiple if they're external, as well as external agencies that you might have to report to. And that's a really important piece of the research process as well, to follow all the regulatory aspects. So that's just another factor. And I would echo what Jack said, is that the breadth of what we can do, or the amount we can be involved, is a little bit to a lot. We're probably not at the phase where somebody said, I don't know how to do research and I want to do the whole process. That might be, we could probably help to try to find a network to get somebody started. But we probably more often deal with people who have a general idea and might need some fine tuning, or might need help with subject recruitment or different things like that. So there's quite a lot we can offer. And I think just one last comment, putting in the scope and the breadth of what we can do, I think our staff is just a little bit over 10. So if you think about that for the whole entire university and the complexity of some of these projects, we can't be a free-for-all for everything, but we do have highly trained and knowledgeable people to help to support a lot of different projects.
Cool, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I think that helped us fill in some gaps. And as I said, when we come back, I think what we want to do is go up in elevation and talk about, if I'm a regular employee, where do I see the effect of research supports activities, either on campus or in publications. I like to help people connect it, so that if someone's sitting there eating their lunch, I can figure out how this is valuable to my life. And I'm sure there are ways, and you guys can probably enunciate those a lot better than we can. But for right now, let's take a break. And we have a quick commercial coming up, and it's literally called Researcher. Did you guys make this commercial? No? Barb did. Well, I'm as excited as you are, because I know very little about it, but I'm sure it's going to be a great break, and we will be back right after this.
I work in the microbiology and immunology department on the Kirksville campus. The beverage that gets me through the day is water. I am a lone ranger. Describe my research project in 5 words. Ticks, nature's dirty needle. I got interested in this field because both my bachelor's and my master's degree are in wildlife management, and as a freshman in undergrad I began doing research with malaria and lizards, and ever since then I've always been interested in zoonotic diseases. So currently I'm studying ticks and the pathogens they carry in northeast Missouri. I would like to continue to do this research because it combines both field work and lab work, but also to help our community. In 3 words, why I perform research? To answer questions. Best research time? Day. Absolutely the day. I used to do spotted owl research in California, and staying up till 1 a.m. could never, it was not my strength. I'd rather get up at 3 a.m. and work all day than to stay up past 10. My most memorable mentor was Dr. Joseph Schall, who I worked with at the University of Vermont, and he got me interested in doing field work along with lab work, and we studied lizard malaria, and we did so in Hopland Field Station in California, and also in Puerto Rico, Bonaire, and Saba. If I had $1 million to spend on any research project, I would build a diagnostic lab here. and I would make it available for people to send ticks to me to be tested to determine whether or not they should seek medical help if they develop any symptoms, but also it would be to look at whether or not we have emerging or new pathogens here present in our tick populations. But I'd also look at reservoir cycles, try to figure out what the reservoir for Hartman virus is, and just to continue doing this research, but to build off of it. My research brings nothing but surprises. Every time I think I'm answering one question, I have 6 new ones. So that's what's great about doing research. What brings me the most pride is that developing the research project here in the last couple of years, I've been able to do it. So it's kind of going back to the Lone Ranger question. I've asked the question, I developed the techniques on how I was going to answer those questions. I did the work, both field and lab. I wrote the paper. I did it solely, and so I take great pride in that I'm developing my own research program. Of course, I can drive a stick shift. All-time favorite book: The Evolution Man, or How I Ate My Father. It's a great book. It's very funny. One piece of advice to future researchers: if you want fame and fortune, then do not go into research. If you want job security, I suggest not going into research. But if you want to be able to answer questions and be your own boss to some level, and you have a passion for science, then absolutely be a researcher. They start off as a larvae. They attach to a host, they take a blood meal, then they drop off that host, and then they molt into the next life stage, which would be a nymph. And that's the ones about the size of a poppy seed. And then the nymphs then hop onto another host, hopefully, take a blood meal, and then once they feed to repletion, they drop off, and then they molt again, and then they become an adult. And then the adults, they again hop onto another host, take a blood meal. And at this point, the Lone Star ticks, which are most prevalent in this area, they mate on the host. So as they're feeding, the female emits a pheromone, the male gets attracted, he moves in, and they mate. She engorges much larger, so she stays on the host longer than the male. She drops off, she lays 5,000 to 7,000 eggs. She then dies. The male can maybe mate with 2 or 3 females, but soon after he will die as well. So 3 different blood meals in order to complete the life cycle. So it usually takes about a year and a half. You're looking about 5,000 tick eggs that were laid about 4 weeks ago by a black-legged tick, or what a lot of people call a deer tick. So I collected some of these adult female ticks that had fed off of a deer carcass. So this was during the last harvest season, and was trying to figure out whether or not I could get them to successfully lay eggs inside the lab, and then have the eggs hatch, because this is part of my transovarial transmission project, trying to figure out whether or not Ehrlichia can be spread from the adult females to her eggs, so they don't need an actual blood meal in order to attain the Ehrlichia disease. All of these different units are going to get burned on a different schedule. And so the idea is that I'll go into each of these 12 units and I'll set up 3 transects, and I will survey them for ticks both before and after prescribed burn. This will occur over 3 years. So I'll look at the prevalence of ticks and then also the prevalence of pathogens in those ticks based off of the burn units. If you have a tick attached to you and you don't know how long it's been there, I suggest you pull it off, stick it between a piece of tape, and put it on a calendar on the date that you found it. So then that way, if you get, aches or pains or flu-like symptoms, think of that tick and then bring it when you go visit the doctor and say, I found this on me and now I'm having flu-like symptoms, or I have a rash. It could be very helpful in the diagnosis if it is tick-borne. And if you have no symptoms for the next 1 to 2 weeks, then toss it. But don't just immediately throw it away, because there's a lot of disease here. So you really need to be careful. The whole goal is just to find out what's here. I've crushed 30,000 ticks. I have a pretty good idea of what's here. Now I just need to know what's infecting people. Yeah, it's a public service, really. I mean, everyone says the only good tick is a dead tick. Well, that's what I'm doing. I'm killing lots of ticks.
Thank you for that amazing AT Still Researcher video. And we are back with Season 6, Episode 5 of the Lunch and Learns. And as Joe said, that we're going to talk a little bit broader about how research support really impacts the university as a whole and the people sort of within the university, staff, faculty, etc. So I know, Alison, that part of sort of the big push is that we are a teaching university. We're not sort of a Division I research university, but there is a push for our faculty to publish and things like that. So could you talk a little bit about how research support sort of helps the prestige of the university, maybe examples that you can think of where research support has helped in sort of high-level research projects?
Right. That's great. I think that is true that our university focuses a lot on the teaching emphasis. That's part of our mission, but obviously becoming well-known in research is also great as well. So our group has helped with a lot of different types of projects. We can help with projects as on a wide variety of breadths, and we also help with creating external collaborations. So we've worked with creating relationships and doing research that is related to the DoD or the NIH. So we've helped and facilitated in ways there. We can help researchers get ideas for recruitment strategies to talk through things and considerations that they'll need for that. We can help, again, with analysis, the write-ups. We can help with setting out a protocol, keeping things in good practice in terms of regulation. So there's lots of ways that we can help the individual researcher sort of elevate what they're doing.
And you help with sort of like inter-university collaboration and projects too, right?
Yes, so we have a few of those. Our department has members on the Mesa campus and in Kirksville, and we also have, and not on either campus actually. And so we can do teleconference and we can bring the team together to support cross-campus projects. So we're happy to do that and sort of build some of those relations.
That's fantastic. And I know Deb is also in charge of the research support newsletter. So if you could tell us a little bit more about how that sort of impacts the university as a whole.
Okay. Well, every quarter I collate all the current peer-reviewed publications of ATS faculty and any abstract or conference presentations. So it pretty much shows anybody, because it's an internal and external publication, anybody who is interested in looking at it to see what all of our researchers are doing. And if you just look through the list of current publications in 3 months, usually it's 2 or 3 pages, and there's clinical research, there's basic science research, there's a wide variety of research, dental research. Every school is usually represented. And anybody on campus who would be interested in doing some of these interdisciplinary collaborations, if you just looked at the newsletter and you could scan down who's doing what, then you could say, oh, maybe I want to go contact this faculty member at this school, and maybe we could come up with a collaboration to do research.
That's interesting. So I can see maybe something that I don't have a lot of awareness of. The fact that even though we have a lot of faculty here teaching classes and doing educational programs, they're also publishing, it sounds like, at a pretty good clip. And there's a lot of those. Honestly, I'm going to have to take a closer look at your research newsletter going forward, because I don't know if I even connected the dots that those are all faculty that maybe I cross in the hallways or that I work with on other projects that are also publishing in peer-reviewed journals. And you've had some pretty big successes, right? There's a couple of times that the research that our people are involved in gains even nationwide attention.
Right.
Can you talk about those?
Yeah, so the most recent project that I helped, or document that I helped, was from the Mesa campus with the Daniels distance runners with Sarah Johnston Everman, that she did a 45-year follow-up study of Olympic long distance runners. So they collected data on these. Jack Daniels was a distance runner in 1966 in or I think it's 66 Olympics, and they collected data on all these elite runners, and then they kept following them up for 45 years to assess how that level of physical fitness translates with aging. Mm-hmm. And so the study was interesting enough that it was picked up by the New York Times, and there was a very brief article when it was accepted for publication. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's in Medicine and Science and Sports and Exercise is where that's going to be published, or this month, I think, or last month. It came out finally.
Wow.
So those are that's one of the articles that got some national prominence. And there's just other ones that it just depends.
Sure, of course, on what people are interested in.
Yeah.
But I think the fact remains that there's a lot of good work going on here, and that maybe is what escapes people's attention most, because it's subtle and it's not the primary thrust of the university. But as Kirsty and Alison mentioned, it's a segment of the university's activity that's growing. And is that so? As a director of the department, is that what you're observing? Like, if there's a trend line, like, what does it look like, or how do you describe it?
One of the things that we've been asked to do with the new 5-year strategic plan is track more research, and so that's one of the things that we're doing a better job of is coming up with mechanisms to track that, because it's on both universities in various areas. So we're working in tandem with various departments to help with that.
Okay.
And so for last fiscal year, for example, Deb, talking about Deb and what she has done, she worked on over 133 manuscripts. She touched over 500 faculty and student hits. Okay, mm-hmm. She had that much activity. They were probably repeat business, if you will, but she had that much activity. Mm-hmm. And so she stays very busy. And like you said, we're not in the forefront of much of this stuff. We're behind the scenes, like mm-hmm. IT. It's the infrastructure that helps get stuff done.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of that, you've built, I think, right, recently you've built in some pretty helpful resources online, right, to help facilitate some of this increased activity. And Kirsty, I think you've got that, right? Don't you have it pulled up on your computer?
I do. Let me show you, and this is especially if you're interested in research support. We're going to go ahead and share this screen now. And then I'm going to have Alison talk us through. This is the home page, but perhaps Alison can talk us through sort of the more interesting resources available.
So we had some thought about, I guess it was probably a little bit over a year ago, thinking about what our vision could be and what we could do to help researchers. Because early on, we talked about how we want to be able to help everyone from the novice to those people more experienced. And so, one way to reach people is through our website. So we did a little bit of a significant website redesign. And we think we've got some nice features that can really help people get started with research, or put things in one spot to help them get going. So you can see there's lots of different options here, and I'm only going to point out a few, but one that I want.
And let's just say too, Alison, that if people want to get to this website, especially if they're tuning in, it's guides.atsu.edu/research support. But if you're not on campus, you're going to want to go through the portal. It will authenticate. So if you just look up research support through the my.atsu.edu, through your sort of main homepage, you will be able to get to this website anywhere you are. And all of these pieces and sort of research support tools that Alison's about to talk to you about, they're all available for you wherever you are.
Right. Yes, thank you. So that's how you find us. If you see here, we can see there's a spot on almost every page, I think, to request research support. So if you want some assistance, that's an easy place for you to go to log your request. I'm going to point out a couple of things that our research coordinator, Jan, and Kirsty actually spent some great time developing. So it's this essential documents binder. And with research, there are some essential things that you need to do. And this list is not exhaustive that we have here, but it's things that it highlights some of the basic things, essential pieces that we need for most of the research done here at ATSU. And I'm going to try to scroll down here. So if we go down, what we have is a virtual essential documents binder, and it has different color-coded tabs, which highlight different areas of the research process. And each of the pages is set up with some best practice recommendations where we say, here's the best practice, and then any information that you might need. So we can see this on all of the pages. If we go to informed consent, this is one that relates to our human subjects. And if you scroll down on here, you'll see contacts to our IRB to help you get started, as well as some documents that may assist with the process. So we have this on all the different tabs, and the other one to point out, I think, which is maybe helpful for some, is this idea of supplies and requisitions. Sometimes researchers have some supplies to purchase, and there's a lot of question about how you do that. And so one of our tabs even links you to all of the different policies that you may want to consider with this aspect of the research. So again, we won't go through all of the tabs, but this is an excellent hands-on resource for people who have experience, but also those just getting started on some of those essential pieces you need to get started with the research study.
Oh, looks like there's a lot of stuff there.
It is. The other page on the resources tab, just to highlight again something more, is one of the questions comes up, or what are the policies related to research? And we don't want to be the keeper of the information. So in the design, the thoughtful design that went in here was to link to the different policies that relate to research. And so we've highlighted those here. So
Oh, yeah, very good.
it's a nice spot for researchers to go to if they have questions about some of these important policies, or they don't want to miss something. And so we've tried to be the one-stop shop for some of the key things that you need to get going.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for infographics. I'm just going to throw that out there. So I'm seeing the research study life cycle.
Yes. So
That looks pretty sweet.
That's another, just a helpful visual for people who are, maybe getting started with research, and what the different steps are, and what things to consider along the way.
Very good. Very good.
All right.
Wow.
We also, and our website here, just to point out, it's going to grow, but right now, we hope we're providing are expanding our reach to get more people, because through our website, they can also get the essential tools they need to get going. I should also point out that while we have the website, we also have some essential document binder templates that we've created. So if there are people who are getting started and wanted to have an actual hard copy of the binder, we can walk people through those steps and get them started with that as well.
Well, you guys thought of everything.
Do you recommend researchers have like a physical Bible of their information in?
That's a great question. Talk to research coordinators in their practice and in their profession, that there's usually a hard copy documentation of a study. So you keep it in a binder or two, or however many, to have your official record. So that is a best practice recommendation. And we can help people get started with that too.
That's great. Thank you, Allison. Hey, we are getting near the end of our program time. Doesn't it feel like we just started? You guys have been having so much fun.
What a party.
We could hang around for a couple more hours, but we won't, okay? So Jack and Deb and Vanessa and Allison, thanks so much for joining us today on the Lunch and Learn and spending time talking about the Research Support Department. We're gonna hang around for a few more minutes here. So if you're watching us on either of the streaming sites and you want to send a question for any of these guys to answer, now's the time. And we'll be watching, and we're gonna force them to stay with us while we watch. Our little technology tidbit coming up next. Have you ever gotten that thing that says your password is going to expire in 30 seconds? You better make a new one. Do you guys get those? I want you to know I'm one of those people that I do not change my password until it forces me to. And it's because of the internal anger that I feel about having to change my password. But the truth of the matter is there's lots of people out there that would like to have your stuff because you have cool things that you are protecting with those passwords, and they want your cool things. So we're going to go into a brief segment that talks about especially, and this is in the interest of the university because we tend to tote around a lot of private and sensitive information, how to create a strong password. Check it out. Yeah, I called it a tech tip. As you can see, our branding has jumped leaps and bounds. That was the Break to Educate, complete with an animated logo. So I sincerely apologize to all of the people who invested the time and energy in the Break to Educate segment, because that was pretty good looking, I felt like. Okay, hey, guess what? We got a question. Deb, I think this one goes to you. Now that you have aired it out for the world that you do this newsletter, and we're all going, oh shoot, I don't know if I read the newsletter. Where are the past newsletters? Are they around?
Yes. So the complete archive of all the newsletters are on the research support website. Actually, on that front page, over on the right side, you can access the entire archive of that. We also include the newsletter on iConnect. So if you ever just go on the main ATSU webpage to iConnect, there are two places on there, just I think the academic publishing news tabs, and then just the publications. So you can usually get the current version on one of those tabs, and then the other tab carries about a year and a half archive. So
Oh, very good.
not as comprehensive as our website, though.
Okay, of course. Yeah, and Kirsty, I think you guys had one comment that came through about something. It sounded very super sciencey, like Qualtrics or Qualitrix or something like that.
So I was going to ask Alison, but also Vanessa, because she mentioned REDCap. What kind of software do they use? How is it available to faculty? Do they have to sort of work with you specifically to get sort of access to technical software?
Right, that's great. We have a license within research support. We have a license for Qualtrics. So through that, it opens up opportunity for people to engage in survey development or things like that to support their research. So we've been able to help in that way on collaborations. And then I could let
Actually, before we let Vanessa talk, could you explain to sort of Joe and people like him what Qualtrics is?
Okay, yeah, sorry. Survey software. So Qualtrics is I think it's the leading survey software available, and it gives a lot of opportunity to customize different types of survey to everything from creating the survey design to inviting people to participate to tracking responses to sending follow-ups and distributing. So it's quite a comprehensive survey software with a lot of capabilities.
Cool.
Much different than some of the other ones we've probably had experience with before.
And Vanessa, if you could talk maybe a little bit about sort of software access that you give faculty or walk them through.
Yeah, so REDCap is the same sort of design as Qualtrics, the same purpose. It's for collecting data, and so it has a website that feature that you can use to collect the data on, or a mobile. The difference between Qualtrics and REDCap may be too detailed right now to give to you. I couldn't provide a list to you right now of what all the differences are, but one of the main ones is that REDCap is actually free, whereas Qualtrics, you have to have a license for that, or the school provides a license for that through paying for it. So
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, Kirsty, you totally anticipated my questions. I feel like that's a sign of our maturing partnership, and it means a lot to me. I want you to know I appreciate that.
I mean, I know I'm not your kid, but
You're not Kit, but you're getting better. I mean, every time is better. We're going to get you there. Hey, we got to go because lunch is over. And this has been very engaging and interesting. And once again, we appreciate all of you for coming and spending some time to explain it to us. But for the rest of you, we hope that you found this informative. Obviously, we're always willing to help answer follow-up questions. I think any of the folks that were here today would say they welcome you to email them or give them a call if you have questions, especially if you're someone who fits into that bucket of maybe I'd like to do some research, or maybe I found some people through the newsletter that I'd like to team up with. Definitely let our folks at Research Support know so that they can show you all the ways that they could assist. If that's all, and I think it is, for our very helpful folks here at Information Technology Services, and on behalf of the library and Human Resources, once again, thanks for joining us for this episode of the Lunch and Learn. We will look forward to seeing you again next time.